Good Monday morning, everyone. John here with the Prepared Mind channel, ready to kick off a big action-packed week with you. But first, we've got 2 orders of old business, then we'll get to the new business. Okay, first order of old business is I spent the weekend, a significant portion of it, building the 3-day and then the 5-day get back or bug out bag, as well as including some special options. There's gonna be an email address down below. If you're interested in us actually taking that and putting it on the club, you let me know and we'll go and take the next step in making it happen. It's a build a bag on your part, but I'm going to make strong recommendations, and then you can change, add, delete, or do whatever you want, because remember, you are the expert in your world. But we'll talk more about that bag later. Additionally, this Wednesday, the 22nd, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys know what time zones you're in, but it's 1 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to do a 1-hour live broadcast, so send in your questions. Now, send your questions to TPMquestions@gmail.com. That is going to be our question, and where we specifically direct you to send information. If you want to talk about the bug out bag, and your interest in it, put on the subject line bug out bag. If you have questions for me for Wednesday's live broadcast, put on there question for live broadcast. That way we can separate them. Remember, we have limited staff and we have limited hours, so try not to overwhelm us there. But that email site is for questions and just generally trying to get a hold of me, get me information. Remember, we're slugged down with a lot, so we'll do our very best, and then we're going to run this as an experiment to see if an email address open to you guys on Patreon. I don't want to put it over on YouTube, because that will result in us getting just hammered to death. So it's just you for Patreon. It's just for you at Patreon. Don't share it with anyone. Okay, anyways, that's the old business. Bug out bags. And then, well, I guess the new business is live broadcast. And then the other new business is what is going on in our world right now, having to do with shit hitting the fan, right? This is where I look around in the world and go, it's coming down. Right now, things are coming apart. I have 3 news articles that are linked. And I also want to point out that there are several different news agencies, and they all have access, like Drudge, Zero Hedge. There are many Patriot outlets, and they all get their news articles from the same source or from similar sources. So I just go to the easiest, most convenient, most familiar ones for us. So I found all of these 3 articles and then went through Zero Hedge to get them up to you. The links are down below for that as well. Number 1. Israel attacks Syria 2 consecutive nights while hosting Eurovision finals. Now, I have to say, I don't have a clue what Eurovision is, and I don't want to know. But it's something that exposes Israel to the world. And so they have been holding off while Eurovision goes on. Their attacks or response attacks to Syria and Gaza. But over the weekend, Syrian government says Israel has launched airstrikes on the country twice in less than 24 hours. Okay, while they're doing their Eurovision, I don't think Israel is going to admit to anything. Authorities in Damascus said Syrian air defenses successfully intercepted multiple projectiles fired from the direction of Israel, though there appears a consensus in emerging international reports that details surrounding the second wave of strikes are vague and remain unconfirmed. The projectiles came from occupied territory, whatever that means. They have all these names for areas over there, occupied territory, blah, blah, blah. What we've got here is Israel is responding to terror attacks from Hamas, and Hamas says, well, Israel's prompting them, provoking them, attacking them. These people are at each other's throats, and they have been since Israel, what is now known as the Nation of Israel, started occupying territory in Palestine. I mean, this battle, this fight with them, it's not just 100 years old, but it goes on way back. Anyways, Hezbollah, Hamas, right? The suggestion is that Hezbollah and or Iran related facilities have been the targets of these attacks by Israel. According to the Times of Israel, they presented Friday's Israel attack as a confrontation with Iranian assets inside Syria. So this deal with Iran is Persia, right? And Persia is heavily involved in thinking and prophecy and this holy war over in the Middle East. It is all quite scary. So let's step away from that. That's Israel and Iran. That's Israel and Syria. That's Israel and Gaza and Palestine. But if we go over to Iraq, Iraqi parliament to vote on a bill that would ban U.S. military troops from Iraq. So the parliament, their Congress over there, is looking at banning United States troops from Iraq, kicking us out, in other words. Iraq has spent the better share of the last 16 years under U.S. military occupation. Now, at one point, we were a liberating force, according to the news. Now, we're an occupying force, right? They want to kick us out. Iraq wants control of its own country, no U.S. military. This is where it gets really nasty. This is where it gets incredibly interesting. What happens then, meaning after our troops have left? What happens then is the real question, according to the news article. Iraq's parliament is already being spun as a pro-Iran faction. And it's been a long time since U.S. officials, Pentagon or otherwise, gave any indication that they thought staying in Iraq was up to the Iraqi government. This is pretty interesting. We say, the United States, that we should be there. Iraq says, well, we get to decide whether you should be there. Right? And the United States government, right, it gives an indication that they thought staying in Iraq was up to the Iraqi government. We get into an argument over sovereignty here. This is where things get really dicey and really scary, right? We're not talking about Afghanistan. We're talking about Iraq, right? The first country went in, got rid of Saddam Hussein, right? But this is what they go on to say. So while the Iraqi prime minister is warning the U.S. that they can't use Iraq to launch a war on Iran, the U.S. is browbeating Iraq over its pro-Iran, right, pro-Iran government-aligned Shiite militias, and doing everything they can to try and portray the Shiite. I am having pronunciation problems. I need more coffee. To portray the Shiite-dominated Iraqi government as effectively in league with the Iranians and subsequently a threat to U.S. interests. This is the part that, even though I can't speak clearly today, is very clear to my mind. Iraq is starting to align in appearance with Iran. In appearance. Essentially, Iraq is saying we don't want a war fought with Iran being conducted from our land. That makes us the enemy of Iran. We don't want to be enemies with our neighbors, and you can't really blame them, right? Who wants to be enemies with your neighbor, right? I don't want an enemy with my neighbor across the street. I don't want him shooting at me, so this is what's going on, is hostility is heating up over there. The United States wants to use Iraq as a base from which to send strikes. At the very least, they want to keep that option open. Iraq is saying, we don't want you to do that. And so the United States government, the Pentagon, bureaucrats, people like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton are going to browbeat them. They're going to bully them, in other words, and say, well, if you're not with us, you're against us. And if you remember that phrase, it was used by George W. Bush, president, after 9/11. You're either with us or you're against us. It was a logical fallacy, and it gave people only two choices: go to war or be the enemy. And you would think that there's probably, usually, always more than two choices in any decision. But when you present the question as you're with us or against us, you're either with the Shiite Iranians or you are with the United States. And if you're with the United States, you have to allow us to use your country to stage military attacks from. At the very least, to stage military, as in air bases and naval bases, so that we can get as close as we can to our enemies, and therefore you choose us over them. It isn't us and them question. And that is being created. It's being carved, right? It's being carved into rock again. And in other words, they're digging in. The Iraqis, don't they have a right to self-determination? Haven't they suffered enough under all of this war since, what, 1992, 91? The first Gulf War? Haven't they suffered enough? Or do they have to continue to be the proxy bitches to the United States government? See, it's this sort of attitude that I don't like, because it makes the United States look bad. And I know the government is the government and the people are the people. But associating the people with this, I consider it reckless idea that anytime the government doesn't get its wishes, it goes to war. You know, it happened and it continues to happen, and they push for it all the time and they threaten it all the time. I'm tired, me personally, of living in a nation that is always threatening others with war, or being threatened with being attacked because of these ongoing issues. It's really upsetting, and it's getting louder. By upsetting, I mean it's looking like they're going to push ultimately to have war. Now I go on to the third story. U.S.-Iran showdown is one false flag attack away from global calamity. Now here's where I look at what is going on over with Israel and Gaza, and Israel and Syria. People are launching missiles back and forth, and each side is claiming, we know where they came from, we shot them down, right? But could it be a third-party organization that is trying to start more chaos with Israel and Syria? And a lot of people say, well, Israel's usually the one antagonizing. Well, it could be another country, couldn't it? We don't know for sure. We just know that people are getting angry. Nations are getting angry. They're firing missiles back and forth. They're threatening war. We had Yemen accused of launching airstrikes using drones against the United Arab Emirates. We have tankers in the Gulf being hit with torpedo or torpedo-like munitions. And over in Iran, we've got John Bolton and Pompeo shooting their lips off back and forth. So this news article, right, claiming we are just one false flag attack away from global calamity. Is that in itself inflammatory? Is that pushing things? Is that going too far? My answer is no. So I want to read this. Just as the fleet was en route, meaning the United States, another naval fleet, right? U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo delivered a warning that was so far beyond the pale of reality, and this is the Zero Hedge article, that it sounded as though it was scripted by a Hollywood film director with a penchant for embellishing American history. Okay. Quote, the response of the United States and our partners and allies has been clear. We do not seek war, the statement reads. Quote, but Iran's 40 years of killing American soldiers, attacking American facilities, and taking American hostages is a constant reminder that we must defend ourselves. There was the Iranian hostage takeover, right, taking of American hostages in the late 70s. believe it lasted 444 days. Everyone was returned alive. A lot of things are blamed on the Iranians. The Israelis hate the Iranians, and the Iranians hate the Israelis. We have one example in history where the Israelis, whether it was a rogue unit or not, attacked the USS Liberty in an effort to draw the United States into a war against an enemy of Israel. It is not beyond the pale, it is not beyond question or anything that some of these attacks that occur against the United States could be false flags used by another nation like Israel in order to draw the United States into confrontation with the enemies of Israel. And any country and every country has the ability to do this. We've got problems down in Venezuela. We've got China down there and Russia as well as the United States. And Iran or Israel or England or some other country could use a false flag attack. Let's just call it a Trojan horse attack, a Northwoods operation style type of attack to draw nations into war. And this happens in every war. Something happens and someone else uses it as an excuse to go to war. Even if that something that was done intentionally, maliciously, and with deception in mind. That is the false flag, is the deception. So if we come down here, now we're back into the article. The author asked, 40 years of killing Americans? Really? The comment brought to mind Pompeo's recent display of braggadocio as he reminisced over his former CIA days. You know, this whole thing smells like Hollywood. Yeah, it almost smells like a Mission Impossible type thing. His former CIA days, quote of Pompeo, "We lied, we cheated, we stole." And he confessed with a hearty chuckle to an audience from Texas A&M University last month. Continuing with the quote, "We had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment," end quote. You know, it is this type of attitude, the bravado, the braggadocio, the admission that they conduct these types of operations, and then to accuse enemies and supposed enemies of being just that, our enemies, whether it's Iran or Iraq or Russia or China. The question we have to ask as critical thinking Americans, as preppers, is why is this being done? Why is it being done intentionally? Are they trying to take us to war? You know, it's, you know, are false flags coming? Does our government know they're coming? Much like Pearl Harbor, where it is all but admitted that the government knew that the Japanese fleet was out there, and they had in port the oldest, rattiest naval ships, and those were sacrificed along with many, many American lives in order to justify or give the United States a big enough reason to go to war in the Pacific. You know, would it have been necessary? Maybe. You know, would have Japan worked its way all the way to our coast? Yeah, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Japanese submarines in World War II, no less, 80-ish years ago, they were in the port of Los Angeles and in the Bay Area. Would they have attacked us unprovoked there? They could have, right? There's just a lot of questions, but what is it we're looking at? I just described World War II and how we got pulled into it at Pearl Harbor, or how it could have happened with Los Angeles or Seattle or the Bay Area. This is how we get drawn into wars. Saber rattling, braggadocio, stern warnings. With Iran, we have sanctions against them. Sanctions is a trade war. It's a form of trade war where we say, people, you can't trade with them. And if you do, you become an enemy of the United States. And so the United States uses its muscle, its economic muscle and its military muscle to get its way. Now, if you were neighbors in a neighborhood and you had a 1-acre parcel with your house on it, And the guy that had 100 acres down the street used his economic might and his influence with the local law enforcement to make you do what he wanted, right? He only wants red rose bushes, so you have to pull up your pink ones, right? And he wants everyone's driveway to be finished concrete in a certain color. And so everyone would have to do that or face fines from the government, right? Economic warfare. We wouldn't like that. So why should internationally, why should other nations like what they're being forced into? This is what we're looking at, right? To underscore exactly how dangerous the situation is becoming, Sputnik, which is a Russian newspaper, reported that 4 commercial ships, 2 Saudi, 1 Emirati, and 1 Norwegian, gives us a little more detail, doesn't it, were targets of a sabotage attack off the coast of the UAE on Sunday. It should come as no surprise as to what country was blamed. Iranian or Iranian-backed proxies are thought to be behind the attack, according to U.S. officials. The Iranians are saying that these attacks are being done intentionally to start this war. Everyone is pointing fingers at everyone else. This happens at the start of wars. Everyone gets scared. Everyone says, if you start shooting, we'll shoot. As preppers, we need to be ready for ultimately what comes out of this. Not only will we end up getting drawn into a war, but it'll have economic consequences here as well. Number one, with oil, the cost of oil, the availability of oil, and that's going to affect all other market forces, the economy, in other words. Our economy is already in the corner, back against the ropes, getting beat on and slugged on with the trade war, the tariff war with China, the slowing and recession of the EU, and our own problems here domestically. You need to be ready for shit to hit the fan. And what we're waiting for in the world of prepping is which domino is going to get pushed over first that's going to take the other ones out. Is the economy going to tumble and they run to war to hide it and pretend like, well, wars are good for the economy? Or are we going to get some war started, some conflict, which is going to scare the economy into collapsing and failure? Right? We know what the bankers want. They don't want to be blamed. Trump is positioned politically, and some would say rather brilliantly, to blame the banks if we have an economic slide first, because he said lower interest rates and quantitative easing to pump more liquidity into the market. Everyone knows that that is a short-lived, it's not a solution, it's a short-lived panacea. All you're going to do is cause inflation. Precious metals are going to go through the roof. If you're positioned for that, that's wonderful, but it won't help the economy any. QE won't. All it's going to do is show that everything that they've promised about doing QE in the first place, everything they promised about lowering interest rates in the first place, did not fix anything. Our economic system is broken, and all that did was prolong things. For everyone who said, John, you've been talking about economic collapse for 5 years, that's correct. Actually, I've been talking about economic collapse since, I think, 2007. But you guys just didn't hear about it. It's coming, and they can only stall it a little while longer. So if it falls first, Trump is going to blame the Fed for taking no action. So the banks would love to see war come first. Any way you look at it, though, the system is in big, big trouble. And if we have an international war where Russia takes one side and China takes one side and the US and Britain and the EU, everyone picks a side, that's not going to be good for international trade. When there's problems with international trade, we end up with supply issues, higher costs for energy, and every nation, no matter what side they pick, suffers to one degree or another based on how they're affected by other nations refusing to trade with them. We're already looking at an entirely new world currency, that is US dollar hegemony. Its dominance as the world reserve currency looks like it's fading, and a world war or a major geographical region in war is going to exacerbate that problem. because the enemies, the perceived enemies, or the threatened enemies, or accused enemies of the United States are going to say, we don't want your currency then. We don't want your bonds. We don't want to play your game. And they've already set up trade with the Chinese yuan. And it looks like this is all coming to pass now. It's taken a long time to get here, but we are here now. Get prepared with food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. If you have to bug out, we'll be talking about bug out bags soon, right? If you have to get back, an equally important requirement. We're going to be talking about bug out bags here pretty quick, and get back bags. I'm really glad that you guys are supporting me to the degree that you are, and I want to thank you for it, and I want to recommend that you continue to share videos and share ideas and get people to come here and sign up. I spend a good part of my day, I usually wake up somewhere between 4 and 5 in the morning when I start receiving text messages and emails, and I go to bed somewhere late at night, usually 9, 10, sometimes 11. So I'm pretty busy, and I really like having the time to do this, to learn, to research, to study, to see it. And I don't want to sound like Chicken Little, always screaming the sky is falling, right? I'm not some whining, sniveling Mary, but I see a lot of this stuff happening. I see it coming. And I want to stay on top of it for myself and for you guys. And once again, thank you for supporting our efforts, making it real. And I look forward to getting your questions, and it'll only be a 1-hour live broadcast on Wednesday. So depending on how many questions we get, I'll try and keep my answers short, brevity being the soul of wit. But, you know, it could end up being just a massive day. If the rest of Monday here goes bonkers, if Tuesday goes bonkers or some big news hits, I may end up doing several videos plus live broadcast. So anyways, food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense, right? Go to the preparedmind.club and let me know your thoughts on the bug out bag that the Prepared Mind recommends. Because I know what the mission is. The mission is to bug out and get a distance for a number of days, or the mission is to get back. And if it's a short trip, you only need a little bit. If it's a longer trip, you need a lot more. And I know what you need to get by, because I have traveled with backpack for days, and you don't want to bring things you don't need, and you don't want to omit things that you're going to need. So if we end up going this way and getting this bug out bag set up for you to purchase, then I need to know. So let me know what you think. Let me know if it's something you guys really want. I imagine a lot of you already have bags of one sort or another all put together. Anyways, that's it. Chance favors the prepared mind. What a busy Monday, and it's just going to get crazier. Is yours, right? Are you ready? Is your mind ready? Godspeed to you. Semper Fi. I'll talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.